Hello and welcome. It's Damascena here, and wanting to explore some more astrology with you guys as we move through this completely tumultuous time in the world. I have been doing more spoken word transmissions recently, primarily because Venus happens to be in the throat chakra. So if you followed any of my other videos, you'll know that she is in the throat chakra band of the Leo cycle. And this means bringing our voice forward and doing more channeling and spoken word transmissions. So, for that reason, and because we are in such a precarious time as a collective, I have taken to wanting to inspect what the stars are saying about the world right now. And so Venus is in this, is one player in a larger configuration in the sky. And I've been waiting for it and wanting to take a look at um, how this is living through all of us. So I'm going to jump right into it and open the chart for us to take a look at. Ah, yeah. So day after day, as we have all been moving through this um, war in the Middle East, I have been, finding that I am in a different place with it. And so finally, the other day, I decided that because I have the privilege of doing this, I sort of needed to take a break and kind of turn off all of the news and not go on social media and just kind of get a break from bearing witness to all of the different atrocities. And I got an opportunity to really look at my internal state. I have felt so kind of just disoriented and discombobulated. And of course, the astrology matches all of that. And so my point is that today I feel like I'm coming from a clearer place. Like that was a really um, beneficial step for me to take to just sort of like empty out and give myself some space. And um, I noticed that I have sort of been bracing and more externally oriented than I normally am. And that can make me feel very ungrounded. And so today I am doing this transmission from what feels like a much more, I don't know if grounded is the word, but I feel a lot clearer. Like there aren't warring factions inside of myself. And so I hope this comes through clearly. So the configuration I wanted to point out to you is this cross that we have. It's a cardinal cross um, in the end of the cardinal signs, and this cross really has the South Node and Venus involved in Libra. Libra is a cardinal sign. Cardinal means initiating. And then we've got in a square is challenging energy to Pluto in the final degrees here in Capricorn. And then we have opposing that Eris and the North Node in Aries. You can see all these things at the last degrees of these cardinal signs. And then at the time I'm making um, this video, the moon is in Cancer in the last degrees. And by the time you're watching this video, I'm sure because this is the 29th degree and the moon moves 13 degrees in a day, I am sure by the time you watch it, the moon will have moved into Leo. So that is a lot of energy. And depending on how much we talk today, we also have this trine between Saturn, Vesta, and Pallas Athena. And so we may have time to talk about that today. I'm not sure. I really want to get into this Venus Libra squaring Pluto in Capricorn configuration first. So we'll begin with Venus in Libra. And if you've watched my other videos, you've gotten a sense of the energy of Libra. And, I love Libra. It's such an interesting mystery school, especially for people in the West, right? I relate to all signs as that particular sign is kind of like a mystery school in and of itself. And each sign issues forth specific lessons for us, right? And so in the sign of Virgo, we deal with natural law and patterns. You know, Virgo is the sign of the virgin priestess. It is a sign of the seer, right? It is opposing Pisces, which is kind of like the all, the liminal realm, the sign of the eternal. It's very vast. It's everything that exists beyond the veil. And then what Virgo does, Virgo kind of reaches in to this liminal, vast, expansive realm and pulls one string. Like this is the priestess's job, right? She dips into the eternal, grabs one thread, right? This is why we can say that like the Norns or the fates are related to Virgo. She pulls the thread through, sorry about that. She pulls the thread through and then weaves it into a specific tapestry down here on the 3D realm. Virgo's an earth sign, right? So she pulls spirit, Pisces, ruled by Neptune and Jupiter. She pulls spirit down into matter and weaves it through. And so people who have strong Virgo in their chart, I happen to have a lot of Virgo in my chart, are seers. They can see patterns. They can see, sort of like what pattern is emerging from Indra's net. They can see like the holographic and fractal nature of the world. And they really understand natural law well, right? And so Virgo is here. Virgo also, from a mundane or more modern perspective, not looking at it as a mystery school, it's ruled by Mercury, the throat of the gods, who rules the throat chakra, the messenger of the gods. It's kind of the job of the priestess. It has a lot to do with how we organize our lives, how we label things, accuracy, precision. That's that threading piece, right? Being able to, stick the needle in the exact right square or place in the tapestry that what we've woven makes sense. It's got a pattern, it's got beauty to it, right? And Virgos can be a bit perfectionist for this reason. Like they have specific standards that they're trying to meet to make sure that this tapestry and pattern that they're weaving becomes something brilliant and beautiful, and it makes sense. And so they can tend to be a bit perfectionist, right? It's the house of service, right? The sixth house. It's the house in which we come forward and we give our service to other people. Vesta, the goddess of the hearth fire, is definitely like a Virgoan type of priestess. It's self-contained, so it doesn't necessarily like need partnership, or it doesn't crave interrelatedness in the same way that, let's say, Libra does. There's this sense like that it's virginal, whole and wholly, complete unto oneself, right? Sacred, sovereign, spiritual. It's got that kind of erectness of the sovereign virgin priestess. And we also, astrologers, will look at the zodiac as a map of consciousness. And with Virgo being the sixth sign right before Libra, which rules oppositions and the sense of other, Libra is kind of like the most self-reflective, right? Virgo is like the most self-reflective sign. It's where we stop after a certain point of development and turn around and look back at ourselves. And so it has to do with self-development, right? And how we mature in our lives. And then moving on from Virgo, we move into the sign now of Libra, which really is reflective of other. It is opposing Aries, that the first sign, the first house, ruled by Mars, which really has the energy of I am, Just that's it. No additions, no subtractions, nothing been corrupted. There's been no conditioning. It's a very primal place. So you've got the I am here in Aries, and then in Libra, we're turning around and looking in the mirror. There's like this mirroring effect, and the other people come online. We say that Libra takes on the nature of oppositions because there is that like effect of looking at or at opposing something else. It's also the house that rules projection, or the sign that rules projection, like how we project our mental framing and our lensing onto other people. Saturn is exalted in Libra. And why is that? You might say that Saturn and Libra don't seem to go very well. Libra is ruled by Venus, and Venus and Saturn couldn't really be more different in a way. But Venus is the heart, it's love, it's beauty, it's Eros, it's got this very warm and juicy, open desire to connect, this sense of attunement and how we meet the world. And so it's got all these really lovely connotations. And then you put Saturn here, and it's like, well, what does that do? Well, what Saturn does here in Libra is it exalts it. Venus rules values, our values, right? I like to say that Taurus rules the values of the self, and like how self-love and self-care and the values we have about how we move through the world. And Libra sort of rules the values that we have for the outside world, right? And so when Saturn comes, in contact with Venus, what he does is he elevates our values, right? He is all about refinement, duty, discipline. He's kind of the patriarch. And I see him as sort of the Abrahamic or God, like the monotheistic religions, the Godhead that sits at the top. And we often see Libra as being ruled by the scales, right? The scales of Mott, where the feather must weigh less, or the heart must weigh less than the feather in order to gain entrance into heaven. And in order to do that, we have to live a very just and kind of perfect life. And that's really the path of ascension. That's the solar type of religions, very transcendental energy. Now, with Venus ruling Taurus and Libra, I like to say that Taurus is the immanence of Venus, like the spirit being held in the body. It's very embodied, it's very somatic, it's very erotic. And that Libra, a Venus Libra, is more of the nature of the evening star. It's more transcendent. It's more associated with the heavens and the above. And so, there's this really interesting philosopher. I'll tell you his name. His name is Jean, because he's like European, right? So Jean, right? Gebser. And he had this philosophy that about the life soul and the death soul. And it's kind of interesting because Aries and Libra are opposing to each other. And so there's this kind of ancient philosophy, let me put it that way, that says, let's see, hold on, what screen am I sharing? Okay, good. That says that that before the solar cults came online, right? That we had this more lunar cult era where everything was sort of haphazard and chaotic, and life was ruled by this vital erotic current, and it was much like nature, right? It was more chaotic. And it was actually that the humans looked up at the stars and the constellations. They said, in this older form, this lunar cult form, everything was round, like the teepee is a round hut. If you look at some of the older dwelling houses in archaic times, a lot of the you know, the mud huts that they made, or even some of the stone architecture. It's more rounded, it's more curvy, it reflects nature. And then at some point, man was finally turning his eyes up towards the heavens. And it was this um, look at constellations and looking at the night sky and seeing sort of the order in the night sky and the straight lines that brought on this kind of idea of like more order and architecture and, you know, straight lines and geometry, and all of that came to us from the heavens. And so there's more order there. And Libra really does. So we said that Virgo rules natural law and Libra rules man's laws, like the way that we order our lives. And there's something in this idea of, I don't know if I want to get into all of this, but like when you look at the astrological ages, like the age of Taurus was when the Egyptians had the bull horns on their heads. And then the age of Aries was the Judaic age. And that's where we get the ram and the shofar from. And there's like all of a sudden, there's lots of ram mythology. Like Aries that comes online, and then Pisces with the fish and Christianity, right? And so when we're looking at ages, the you know, if you look at Aries, we know that the opposing sign has to inform that age. And so there are people who think, you know, who study this idea of ages. It's not even an idea, it's a real thing, who study the epochs, the ages. Like we're moving into the age of Aquarius. I know all people have heard about that. That the ages are influenced not just by the sign that they're in, but by the opposing sign. And so we can look at how the Jewish people began to organize, right? From this more maybe primal and life-based world that was Egyptian culture was very emergent, right? The people were dealing with the present and like what was coming online right now. And then, you know, with the Judaism, it was like things became more organized. And the 10 Commandments, we say, are something that were influenced by Libra, law, man's law. And so there's something about Libra and Venus here ruling harmony, beauty, and proportion, which a lot of times we think of as feminine qualities, but really they are more solar, more masculine. They come out of the rational mind. And Libra is a masculine sign. It's ruled by air, which is a masculine. And remember, we're not talking about men and women here. We're talking about an energetic. It's a masculine and element, air. So we've got fire and air, the two more subtle elements that are masculine. And that makes sense because in this cosmology, the masculine rules the heavens and the ascent and the transcendent. And then we've got earth and water, which are more gross as elements ruling the feminine. And the more like immanent and embodied matter, mother, right? And so when we look at Libra, what we're looking at and the like energetic of Libra is concerned with all of these things: order, law, how we all get along. Remember, there's that other there, how we all get along with each other. You know, all of these issues can come up in Libra, and it's not so much that we just are gifted harmony, balance, beauty, proportion. It's that we are in the struggle to create those things, to have them, and then to maintain them. You know, one of my favorite writings from a founding father talks about how democracy and freedom aren't something that we just arrive at and achieve one day and then have ad infinitum, right? It's something, you know, our democracy and our freedom is something that has to be continually tended and maintained, and we have to strive for it. And so it's the same kind of energy with Libra, is this kind of like striving to maintain harmony and balance, and what happens when things get out of balance. And now Venus, the sign that rules Libra, is moving through Libra, and we have, so when that happens, when Venus is in a sign, or any planet is in a sign that they rule, the energy gets magnified. And so what is out of order, what is out of balance, what is out of proportion, the places where our values have become skewed and are promoting this out of balance, will all be magnified. And we can see that on the big screen, like where things have become problematic, right? And what are we going to do about it? What are our values? And, the beautiful thing I have felt is that, like, there's no place to land in this whole threshold that we've been in since the eclipses that happened in Libra and sort of felt like they've turned the world upside down. There hasn't been a place that I have felt like I can land and not be in an energetic of self-righteousness. It's like everything is up for inspection right now. And so we will feel the uncomfortability of, what does it mean when things are out of order, when our sensibilities are offended, when rationality isn't the order of the day, when people blatantly break the law, or, even not just the laws of our country or our city, regionally, but like break the laws of man, right? And how offensive that can be, or how disconcerting or disorienting that can be. And then we've also got Venus then traveling across the South Node. And the South Node is karmic. It's all about karma. And the purge of that. Like how do we resolve karma? Where do we wrap it up? What do we have to let go of in order to complete a karmic story? The South Node is the descending node. And so there's something descending. And so Venus is crossing this point of descent, this karmic point that's asking us to purge or get rid of an old way of being that is causing us to be out of balance, out of proportion, out of harmony, to let that go. And then she's squaring then Pluto in Capricorn. And so I'd like you to now take all of that information, that desire for order, that desire to know where we are on the map, because order gives us that gift. It allows us to know ourselves. It sets up structure and organization for us to live in a society that functions, in a culture that works, right? I'd like you to take all of that and sort of set it to the side. And then we're going to take a look then now at Pluto in Capricorn. So I'm going to take a breath, because I want to give everybody an opportunity to change gears, right? Because we're going to look at a whole different energetic now. And so now we're looking at we're still in the cardinal cross, which is important. The cardinal cross is what pins the world or the matrix, right, into the universe. It is the solstice points and the equinox points. And so it affixes us to the cross of the universe, in a sense. And it's really, really important. This energetic, it's called the world cross, right? Because everything that really has to do with the world, it is manifested, it's evoked from the tensions of this cross. And when I say tensions, I mean it, because, to make the cross, you have to have squares and oppositions, and there's tension and challenge in these energetics. And this is where things are birthed. This is the birthplace of everything, is through polarity, right? Tension, challenge. That's where things spring to life. It's not so much in the easy places, right? The easy places just allow a nice flow to go through. So energy flows nicely through them, but things don't really evolve or change too much through trines and sextile, not in the same way. So we're having a square to Pluto in the sign of Capricorn. And for me, the best way to understand Capricorn is to really, to understand its dynamics with Aquarius. And Aquarius, of course, is always important because it's the age we're moving into. And so, set in the background, when you're looking at from like the macrocosm to the microcosm is the age we are evolving into. We're right on this cusp of transitioning from Pisces to Aquarius. So everyone who incarnated now came here for this age shift. And if you are listening to this video in this moment, you will probably acknowledge that you feel that call on your life. You feel that you are here for the transition team, right? So Capricorn rules closed systems, power that coalesces around a central rod or a central force. A good way of looking at that might be like a beehive, how there is a queen bee and everything in that hive, everything that's going on is in service to the queen and the survival of the hive. And so we can look at Capricorn as relating to hierarchy. A lot of people think that Capricorn rules government, right? I mean, and I can see that. Of course it does, because government is power that coalesces around a central force and it's hierarchical. And then Aquarius, what Aquarius is everything that has left the closed system and is pushing out on the edges to change society. So we say that archetypes for Aquarius are like the rebel, the revolutionary, the person who cares a lot about liberty and the current, that Promethean current that runs through us that wants liberation. The artist, the singer that are singing about revolutions, the people who want progress, and they want progress not just for themselves, but for everyone. There's this humanitarian bent. So they have purposely left the closed system from an evolutionary perspective, exiled themselves from the conformity of Capricorn and moved into this heretical place where they're speaking out against the closed system. And I wanted you to understand that just because Pluto will move back into Aquarius soon, it's important to understand the sort of dynamics here. And so as Pluto has spent since 2008 moving through Capricorn, our eyes have been opened. The veil has been lifted. I mean, that's what Pluto does. He reveals the pus and crap and vomit that's hiding underneath. He's a revealer, right? A revealer of truth. He shows us the underworld. He takes us to the underworld, right? And allows us to see clearly. He removes the veils. And so we've all kind of gotten this 14-year masterclass on government corruption, places where government is out of alignment. We began his trek in Pluto with him causing a financial crisis, right? That really revealed the corruption of the banks and our central, right? Centralized banking is like power that coalesces around a central force. So he's revealed to us the problems with that. And we have really been going on for many, many years, really reviewing the structure of government. You with me? So for me, Pluto in a chart, especially on a personal level, right? Pluto's so multifaceted and it can be difficult to pin down with language all that Pluto is. Pluto rules sort of the underworld, which is the mystery. And so a lot of times language doesn't do justice to all of what Pluto is. But for me, what his action is that he pulls us down into the underworld again and again and again and again until we get the lesson. And because he moves so slowly, wherever he is like in our natal chart, it'll be like we have a whole lifetime filled with those types of lessons. Like for me, Pluto happens, I'm a Pluto in Libra generation child. And so that means that I'm dealing with the shadow of like codependency, people pleasing, this idea that I think one of the best visuals for Libra in a personal chart is this idea of a tuning fork, right? And how a lot of times the shadow of Libra will be like you walk into a space and it's tuned to a particular note. And because Libra wants to harmonize, one of the shadows will be that we change the note, the authentic note of ourselves to harmonize or match that tuning fork. And a different on sort of the flip side, a different part of that shadow could be that we never like the tuning fork of the space that we've moved into, and so we try to bang our fork louder. And so the deep lesson of Pluto in Libra is all around attunement, like when it's important to attune and when it's important for us to play the role of the tuning fork. When we walk into a space and the energy is discordant, how can we bring greater resonance into that space? And so that manifests like in personal lives around codependency versus interdependency. Anyways, I don't want to get too off track. However, for people, everyone I talk to that is part of the Libra and Pluto generation deals with these themes. And so my point is that where Pluto is in the chart will pull us into the underworld again and again and again and again. And so with Venus squaring Pluto, Venus rules the heart, it rules love. Libra rules relationships. This is how these things play out in our lives. It rules our values. I'll tell you, for me, a personal story is my oldest, not my oldest, my older son. I've got two boys that are in their young adult lives and two kids that are in middle school and high school, so minors and then adults. And my 22-year-old son last year passed away of a drug overdose, and I can't tell you how many countless hours I have spent just reviewing everything, like what went wrong, where did it go wrong, how did it go wrong, what are the different things that contributed. And one of the things I can see is that in 8th grade he had some friends from early childhood. We moved back from Texas, he got enrolled in school, had friends from early childhood, and they hung out in this new school. And Tanner was a good kid. He played athletics. He did well in school. He was bright and he was special, right? And he got in with this crowd, and the group got labeled bad in school. They got in trouble. And, once you kind of get a target on you in school, it's hard to get that label off of you. And I think that he internalized a lot of that. He was a Libra himself. He's a September 24th, first degree of Libra. And so, there was like deep shame around the idea of being bad. And I think, he really, when something's projected onto you, Libra, it's easy to become that thing. It's easy to agree with it. It's easy to just, brains aren't super developed or complex when you're in 8th grade. And so I think he really internalized that. There was a lot of shame, and then he sort of lived that out as like a sense of manifest destiny. Now, of course, there's other contributing factors, but I'm just telling this little personal aside story. So my daughter got in trouble at school at recess. She has a new vice principal at her school. The vice principal does all the disciplinary stuff. They had a fabulous, when my other kids were in school, my son went to this middle school prior. They had a fabulous vice principal who I actually knew from school growing up, me. And she was just so herself, Libran in a sense, so kind of balanced and really easygoing. Of course, all schools discipline, but, she let the kids be human. She let them mess up a little bit, without making a big deal about it. Well, this new teacher comes from an older like she taught older kids, so the expectations of the kids are, I think, a little bit mature, and she's very discipline focused. So the school is feeling very militaristic, and like the focus is primarily on discipline, and all of the kids. I've talked to the parents, all of the kids, all of the parents are a little bit like, what the heck is going on, you know? So she gets in trouble today for doing like the most human thing. And one of the teachers, and now the teachers too, they're very emboldened by this. I think, especially a lot of the older teachers, they probably were thinking that the school was too lax, too progressive, maybe didn't do enough on the discipline front. And I feel like they feel empowered now that there's this vice principal who's very rule based, very structured based, very rigid um, there. And so the teacher that put her in trouble for doing the most human thing followed her to another area of the building, commenting about her daughters and how her daughters were so well behaved and they would never behave the way that my daughter behaved. And so she was commenting and shaming her, right? I got so activated today when I heard all of this because I'm thinking, like, you're talking to me about recess. You're talking to me about not something that happened during the academic day. You're talking to me about a kid who did something that is totally normal for their age. Might not have been like up to snuff with the rule, but it wasn't anywhere near like bullying, vandalizing, swearing. It was just, she had her phone out and she was putting it away, and a teacher caught her with her phone out, right? Like, she's a kid, it's recess, they're going to check their phones. She wasn't sitting on it for half an hour. She checked her text messages to see if she had a message. Anyways, and got ISA, like an in-school suspension for it. So I went off. I hurt my throat yelling. I mean, granted, I shouldn't have been yelling. But I got to see inside of this experience what I strongly value. And I strongly value people being able to make human mistakes and do human things without being shamed for it. And I value that because when my son was going up through school, my son who passed away, whenever the teachers would call, what I would do is go, oh, you shouldn't have done that. You were bad. And I'd agree with the teachers, and I'd sort of not advocate for him as strongly as I could have. And so instead of being a safe place for him to land or being neutral, it was as if I agreed, right? And so it reinforced the belief that he was bad. It reinforced whatever shame there was. And so, anyways, I'm talking about values, right? How we see the values. And so Venus rules values. Venus is squaring Pluto. Schools are this central uh, hierarchical kind of like place where there is centralized power. And so there was this clash today, and I was sort of brought to the underworld to explore this. I was really activated by it. Like, something in the unconscious just came forward, and I was like, no. And I went and picked her up. I was not going to allow her to sit in ISA for doing that. And I picked her up when I was activated. And I'm like, wow, I wonder how I would have handled this if I didn't come at it through a sort of like unconscious trauma response. Would I have done the same thing? Would I have done it more gracefully, right? Or would I have, there was this primal protective lioness part of me, but it was clear to me, even in the moment as it was happening, this other part of me that was watching me do it, was aware that like the activation and the emotion was coming from a place of being sort of traumatized by the loss of my son and seeing this repeating pattern, right? It's like I didn't even see it. It was like I felt it in my body as a threat. And I wasn't going to allow my daughter to be, I don't know, labeled in that way. And so that's a Venus Pluto square kind of thing. And so I wanted to give you that like personal anecdote. And then we also have Venus opposing Eris in Aries, and Aries is very individualistic. And one of the reasons my daughter got in trouble was because she tried to advocate for herself. They wanted to take her phone away from her. She asked, I have told her not to give her phone to them because they have lost something valuable the year before. And we had this deal that she could, anything that the school wanted to take would go directly to the principal's office. The head principal is really great. Sorry. Anyways, in advocating for herself, they said she was disrespectful. That's what happened. And that's why she got sent down. And, she needed to be seen. She needed to, the I am of who she was to be acknowledged. And when you're talking about that kind of power differential with school and authority, it's like they just don't see the kids. They don't see them as human beings. And so she had this sort of like activation. And Aries is all about that, our identity, the I am, who we are. And so Eris there is the goddess of chaos and discord. And I can see that in myself as well. She feels very closely related to Pluto, but she rules things like divine retribution. And so there's this idea that like she gets activated and causes chaos and destruction when there's injustice. And I think I felt a little bit of injustice for my daughter because I thought that that was such a severe consequence that she got. And the fact that a teacher followed behind her, shaming her, really made me upset. And so it was like part of my Eris came out. And I kind of caught myself as I was yelling, and I had a minute to get off the phone before I went and picked her up. And I'm like, however I go into the school, I can't go in this energy. Like I am going to burn things down if I go in with this energy. But the North Node is here. And so the focus is here. Like the collective movement is towards this Aries energetic. And Aries is ruled by Mars. And so there's this, like activating primal current of expression and action and warrior-like quality. And then this node that kind of like is a compass for where we're directing our energy from an evolutionary perspective is conjunct the goddess of chaos and discord, and has been for a little while now. And so we can see that taking place on the big screen as well. And she's also been squaring Pluto for years now. These two move very slowly, and they've kind of been moving in and out of exact conjunctions since 2020. So Pluto moves faster even than she does. She moves very slowly. For instance, I'm 44. She was at 14 degrees Aries when I was born. So she's only moved 20 degrees in 44 years. So she moves very slowly. And my thoughts about her is she spends about a lifetime in each sign. And so really, I think you can see that over the last 50, 60 years, like people who grew up during the civil rights and sexual liberation movement, these were all I am based. They were that separating. Aries is a separating sign. It's where we leave the liminal waters of unity and the all, and we're given the divine spark. So we're separated, right? In Aries. And so there's this sense of wanting to claim an identity, wanting to claim our individual divinity, our individual selves. And that's by the North Node. And then we can see that same thing playing out on the big screen. And so this is a tense aspect that we're in. And what do we do with when the energies are we don't have balance, we don't have harmony, because we're in the struggle for those things. Pluto is plowing or tilling the ground in the sign of hierarchy and order, right? The power that coalesces around a central force. So there's a disruption there that are centralized forces of power. We can sort of see on the big screen too, it's like this idea of empire, which is of course power that coalesces around a central force, like the Roman Empire. We can see that this idea of empire is being exposed, right? This dominator culture is kind of being exposed. And we're having to, Venus values, Libra, squaring Libra, inspect what our values are around that. Like empire can offer, especially to its own citizens, the closer you are to the central power, so us as Americans, can offer benefits. Most importantly for Americans, what it offers us is physical safety, right? We spend an inordinate amount of money on defense forces, and our defenses are pretty fortified. And so from outside threat of people who are not in the closed system, we are reasonably safe in the world, right? And so, I mean, I guess you could, and that is something. When you look at what's happening to the population in Gaza and how easily everything can be destroyed, that's not a benefit I want to take for granted. And we're also looking at some of the poisonous features of empire and how when you're on the wrong side of empire, that can be very problematic. And so what are our values around that, right? How would we restructure, reorder, rebalance, reharmonize? How can we bring those values online in a way that is more beneficial for everyone, which is what Aquarius is concerned with. And what I think is when Pluto finally moves into Aquarius, that we'll be asking those questions and looking at some of the injustices and inequalities, Libra, because Libra squares Aquarius, or sorry, trines Aquarius. They're in the air triplicity, and so is concerned with a more equal distribution of power. And yeah, it's interesting to look at. And so there is nowhere to land. Like, how do you orient when there's so much primal sort of destructive energy and it's all coming at the sensible Libran who just wants beauty, harmony, and proportion? And it's an opportunity to reinspect like how we orient to these more primal impulses that are coming through us, right? This is, there's vitality, there's Eros, there's emergence inside of chaotic destruction. Like we talked about when we talked about the tower, but it's very disconcerting and disorienting to be inside of that. So I wrote this little transmission yesterday that just talked about being with and observing and allowing the expression of all of my feelings. Like just today, I allowed myself to get angry in service to my daughter and in service to protection, and just kind of like observing where I am. And I will write that teacher a note and just say, I'm sorry I got so activated. It wasn't her fault. She was just following the rules herself. And I'm not sorry that I took a stand for my daughter either. And I didn't say anything super destructive, but still, so it's been about like, how do I be with all of these different feelings that are coming through? Like, as I'm watching what's happening on the big screen, I'm feeling things like, I'm feeling offended. My Libran sensibilities are offended. I'm feeling disgusted with what I'm seeing. I'm seeing, I'm feeling that kind of anger we feel when there's a lot of injustice, and I'm feeling the urge towards divine retribution in service to justice. And like, I can't personally get any of those things. And so all I can do is just be with how it feels to be helpless and powerless and angry and disgusted and sometimes morally indignant and feeling self-righteous. And yeah, that's it. That's all we can do, really, is be with those things. And I think, for me, and the transmission I made before this was was talking about the full moon in Gemini and Sagittarius, about how we shouldn't be crystallizing around ideals, ideologies, like not letting our air get super crystallized, our intellect, and just sort of be open, be present witnesses to what we're seeing. None of us can really personally affect this. These are the gears of gigantic institutions that all have an interest in what is happening and what we see playing out in the Middle East. But when the time comes, when the destruction phase is over, having bore witness and given our attention and not bypassed, and we're actually present with all that is happening, whether it's in our personal lives or it's this larger thing out on the big screen, we really can, with our energetic, because it hasn't bypassed, we can be part of what is built in the place of what's been destroyed. Whether that looks like an equitable peace solution or an equitable state, something that is sincerely just, right? Like, we can bring ourselves forward for that when the time comes. It's just that the energy isn't, I'm not saying don't protest. If you feel called to protest, don't not do that, right? If you feel called to be involved and use your voice and bring your voice forward, especially with Venus being in the throat chakra, don't shut your voice down or your expression down. I'm just saying, like, from an energetic perspective, everything we're looking at is sort of like in the sort of chaos and destruction phase in a way. I don't think it's going to not be in that phase until Pluto moves into Aquarius. And then I think at that point, the being that we are in will help manifest a more just outcome. If we all turn our faces away and say, this is too hard to look at, it's too difficult, and I don't really want to be with any of these emotions because it's bringing up my own shadows. It's making me see where I were with myself, or I hate my neighbors, or where I dehumanize people, or where I'm racist, all of the ugly things that we're seeing coming out. So I'd rather just not look at it. If we do that, then we're not in an integrated place to make a stand. And so we can't really do anything to affect the building phase when the building phase comes. And so be with all your feelings. Let them pass. Like, be with your feelings with open hands. And I've been saying this because the energy is translating to us. We even have in Scorpio, Pallas Athena, which is the daughter of the patriarchy. And sometimes she's like opposing her father, Zeus. And sometimes the daughter of the patriarchy is like the woman who works in service to keeping the patriarchy empowered. But there's something like deeply alchemical about Scorpio. And then, this opposition to her father, it does make me want to watch what the women in the world do. Because all archetypes go through a maturation phase. And so with Pallas Athena, her work and then her medicine is to reconnect with her matrilineal line. Remember, she was born out of Zeus's head, fully formed. So she's this woman who didn't have a childhood and doesn't have a connection to her mother. And she becomes her father's favorite daughter and his war strategist. And she's got a lot of really strong warrior-esque, like almost masculine qualities that she brings in and embodies in this beautiful way as the feminine. But she's also she's a goddess of culture. She's a patron of like the arts and the theater, and she's a philanthropist, but like all the things that the elites love. Right. And so when Pallas Athena reconnects with her matrilineal line, which I think is Scorpio is a great place to do that. she then becomes like this exalted form of herself where she's given the Aegis, which has Medusa's head on it. So she's given the snake medicine, and then one of her totems is the owl. And so there's this kind of like serpentine owl-like energy with Pallas Athena when she's in her more exalted form, right? And so it really, this configuration makes me want to really watch what the feminine does right now. And then you'll see that this is a water trine between Pallas Athena, Vesta, the goddess of devotion. So wherever she is in the chart, we're very devoted to that thing. And so this is Cancer, this is the emotional body, right? And then is trining Saturn, which is another kind of like patriarchal figure. And so we'll have to see if the women support empire or if they support transformation, right? It's something interesting that I want to watch because of the way the energies are. These are easy flowing energies. And so we may see that there are a lot of women. Remember, it was, I think, like the Dalai Lama who said, Western women will save the world. What I've been seeing is a lot of Western women upholding the status quo. And it's been a personal disappointment for me because the only way this thing really ends and ends for good is with transformation, which means we have to go with the energy. We have to go with the destructive, chaotic energy. Doesn't mean we can't raise awareness or do our humanitarian work in the process. In fact, I think it's an important thread, but there isn't a way to stop the momentum of what is happening right now, unfortunately. But the momentum is part of, and if we stop it, I think we don't get the transformation. So it's hard because that's one layer, and then on another layer people are dying, like the human level, and there's so much heartache, trauma, distress. I don't even have the adjectives to explain the human toll, right? So when I'm talking about the energetic layer, I'm not advocating for what's actually happening on the human level. But you have to wonder, like on the human level too, is if like the impetus of this was like, I don't care what the cost is, we've got to move something. It's stagnant. And I have wondered if that was Hamas's thinking in doing what they did. I can't imagine that they'd be thinking anything else because they had to have known that whatever happens next is like a gamble. It's like a game of Russian roulette. But it was creating chaos, right? So we have to just keep rolling with it, keep allowing ourselves to sort of be like the boulder that picks up momentum that rolls down the hill, and hopefully on the flip side of this, whatever the boulder transforms into when it smashes at the bottom is going to be something that is just an equitable, and I really think it has to be a third way. I've even been looking at like outcomes for this particular conflict, and they have this idea of not a two-state, not a one-state solution, but a federation. And that's interesting. And that to me is like a third way. It's like something we haven't tried. So, I guess my point is with this whole video that we're in the transformation phase, and our values, what we value, order, justice, law, not law, law breaking, all of these things are sort of up for inspection and transformation. And it's allowing it to happen, like the not gripping, the not being in resistance to it, that is the thing that's going to allow it to transform. And I've sort of been saying this in different ways in the last several transmissions I've done, because the energy has been telling us that we are in a transformation phase. It's a transitory phase. The weather feels very choppy and effed up, but all we can do is be in it, be like the earth who receives the weather, and then allows the weather to change it. It's how the grass gets green is when it rains. It gets dry when it doesn't rain. You know, it's this kind of same thing, like being the open receiver of what we're given, being with the isness of what's happening, no matter how horrible it is, and going with the momentum. There's a lot of momentum on like both sides here. So wherever you stand or don't stand, um, there's some momentum here. And so that would be my best advice, is just sort of like, um, what's that spiritual tradition? Just like Aikido, you know, like how do you take the force that's coming at you and transform it, like move it through you? All right, I feel like I'm rambling at this point. So that is what I wanted to share. We are definitely like in a deep, long, dark night of the soul. It invites us to bring all of our dark feminine qualities forward. You know, everything that we know from the deep dark um is being invited to the table right now. And so bring your darkness toolkit. All right, loves. I'll talk to you.